Hello and welcome to Global Dialogue. I'm Shireen Bhan and we're in conversation with the head of global safety at Meta. India is, of course, Meta's largest market in terms of its user base, and to talk about what the India roadmap looks like from a safety perspective and what the global trends are, joining me is Antigone Davis. Antigone, thanks so much for joining us here on CNBC-TV18. Appreciate your time. Let me start by talking to you about Digital Suraksha, which is the campaign that Meta is working on with the Indian government. What are you hoping to achieve at the end of this?
Well, one of the things that we are definitely hoping to achieve is to make people more aware of the tools that we have, particularly in context of youth safety. We have over 30 tools that we've launched. We want to make sure that people are aware of them and using them. And we actually heard from the minister today about a push for us to do this more in the states throughout India. And we will take that feedback back.
And, if you are going to be doing this in India and relevant to an Indian audience, I would imagine that it will have to be in different languages because that is how you will get the message across. So what's the plan on that front?
Yeah, so to give you an idea of our commitment to ensuring that we're bringing our safety tools across the languages that are spoken in India, we have over 20 different languages that are covered by our content moderators. These are the moderators that ensure that we're enforcing our policies properly. Our family center, which is launched here in India, has 10 different languages. So we're very committed to ensuring, Indian languages that is, to ensuring that we have provided the right safety languages, languages across all the safety, safety across all the languages.
In terms of making the tools and the solutions more contextual and relevant to the audiences that you are catering to, from an India perspective, given the demographic, given what you are seeing in terms of trends of online abuse, etc., is there anything specific that has been done to customize the tools for an Indian audience?
Well, let me talk to you for 1 minute about the way in which we ensure that we're customizing. We have partners throughout India that we work with, NGOs, so the Rati Foundation, the Center for Social Research, Red Dot Foundation, that are working with us to ensure that our whatever guides, whatever resources, whatever tools we're building, whatever policies we have are informed by the local context. There are also things that we launch India first. So I'm going to tell you one that's not safety specific and then one that is safety specific. Sure. Reels, which I'm sure everybody in India knows, was launched in India first. Safety wise, we have a big campaign called Report Don't Share. It's in relation to child sexual exploitation material. We launched that first in India. We worked with Indian organizations to develop the content to make sure that it had the right context and brought it to India first.
Was there a reason why you brought it to India first?
I think we have a large number of users in India. There are a large number of young users in India, and we wanted to be sure that we were meeting the needs of the country. There are other things that we've done that have been India first on the safety front as well. For example, in terms of women's safety, we have something that's where you can lock your profile, because we heard that there were issues around photo safety for women in India, and so we developed a specific tool and launched it here in India.
Speaking of how the experience and the learnings from India have helped you customize some of these solutions, let's talk about WhatsApp, because that's ubiquitous here in India and also has become a large part of the problem, especially when we talk about the dissemination of fake news, misinformation, and so on and so forth. And many measures or steps have been taken by Meta to try and curb that. But, do you believe that you need to do more? And what is the learning now after what you've done?
Well, what I would say about safety generally is that we always feel like we want to do more. In other words, the way in which people are using technology is constantly evolving, and the way in which we're deploying safety is constantly evolving. And I don't think this is an area where you would ever see us sort of stop and say, that's it, we're done, we're finished. It's always changing. It's an adversarial space, and so we're committed to always improving. You talked about misinformation, for example, with WhatsApp. One of the things that we did was to set forwarding limits on content to ensure that we could slow down that any kind of spread of misinformation. That's the kind of learning, and oftentimes tested here in India to ensure that we're getting it correctly.
And I think that has made a difference in terms of just being able to slow down the virality. But on the back of the feedback that you are getting, and I know that regulators around the world are in dialogue and conversation with tech companies like you. Where do you feel you need to prioritize action? Where is the immediacy, the urgency today in being able to curb misinformation?
Well, I would actually take one step back and say, if you ask me what do I think the urgency is today, I think the urgency today is to try to develop a set of standards for industry broadly. So, right now in India, people are having active conversations around regulation. We welcome that. Our interests are aligned with policymakers when it comes to safety. We are in need of a set of standards that are clear and concise for all of industry, that ensure that we all are working with the same understanding of what is expected of us. And so you'll see that we already are collaborating deeply with policymakers, and will continue to do so that we can get to that place.
Are you also collaborating with your peers? Because there are
Yes.
reports suggesting that there is likely to be an alliance of sort of Google, Meta and others coming together, and they have proposed, at least to the Indian government, for setting up a sort of self-regulatory body, a self-certification body, a network of fact checkers, if you, for the lack of a better word. What's the progress on that, and is there alignment between the tech world on what the standard should be or what the code should be?
So I think you're speaking about the Misinformation Combat Alliance. That's not an area of my expertise, but what I can speak to is broadly about industry coming together. So I do think that we're seeing more and more areas where industry is coming together. So I don't know how familiar you are with something called GIFCT. This is a global forum to counter terrorism. That was really generated with governments as well, and industry coming together to come up with a way together to fight terrorism content on platforms. Another area is something called the Tech Coalition. So this is an industry alliance across Google, Microsoft, Meta, and other Snap and other companies to fight child exploitation, to set up both a joint effort in terms of the technology that we're developing, in terms of the programming that we're developing, in terms of the resources that we're developing, to ensure that we're doing this industry-wide, because almost all of these problems are industry-wide problems. They're never, it's not generally something you see on only one platform.
No, you're absolutely right. This is an industry-wide issue. But you also talked about the need for standards that the industry has clarity on, but the need for harmonization across the world, and that I think is posing to be a challenge, because India is looking at its own regulation, different jurisdictions are looking at their own regulations. How much of that is a challenge for a company like yours, given the fact that you're operating across so many different jurisdictions today? Well,
as someone who used to work for a regulator, I very much understand every regulator's desire to sort of set the rules and to know within the context of their country what they think is needed. I also recognize the need for global standards and some uniformity, because we are operating at a global scale. But interestingly, I think we're starting to see some of that harmonization, in the sense that we see many members of many regulators around the world focusing on the same issues.
Right.
So I'll give an example.
But their approach to that might be different.
They might be different, but through conversation, you get some beginning of uniformity, and I would urge them to go in that direction. But I'll give one example. So let's take age verification.
Right.
This is something that's coming up quite a lot around the world. People are trying to figure out, how do we ensure that industry is providing age-appropriate experiences? And age verification, or understanding the age of the user, is important for providing age-appropriate experiences. Now, we generally hear oftentimes from regulators, it doesn't really matter where, a push for using ID verification, until they start to think about and hear the complications of that. It is complicated, because not everybody has an ID. You're going to cut off access. Also means that we will, as an industry, will be collecting more information than you might want to give to us. It's not just the age at that point. Generally, IDs carry a lot more information. That said, that could be one potential solution. But what we're starting to see is that policymakers around the world are honing in on multiple options. So instead of saying you just have to verify by ID, maybe there are other ways in which you can identify somebody's age, maybe signals on the platform, or maybe technology that uses the face to understand what somebody's age is. These are different solutions that are developing, and if we can work globally, we can actually open up the door for multiple solutions and then allow those solutions to be offered around the globe and satisfy the need of understandable need and concern policymakers have with that particular issue.
You talked about verification. So let me address the issue of the rollout as far as the verified plan is concerned. And we've seen this back and forth with Twitter, but that's a different story altogether. I want to understand what the rollout for you so far has been like, and especially as you pilot this now in the US, and what the plan is for India, and also the implications of that. Because if you were to be able to just pay for a blue tick or a blue badge or whatever the case may be, how do you then ensure that it's not just an identity issue, but the verification process was not just about the blue tick, it was about people, you assume that this was somebody in a position of authority, in a position of power, in a position of decision making, and so on and so forth. How do you ensure that it is not up for misuse?
Well, I think there's a reason that it use the word pilot. I think that's important. I think there's a reason that it is a pilot. Almost everything that we do, we test first. We try to roll it out in a controlled or smaller space to understand it so that we can answer those very questions that you have. How are we going to ensure that it works as designed? How are we going to ensure that when you're talking about verification, we're able to do that in an accurate way and then provide the services that come with that verification? And so this is why it is really at a pilot stage now, and it will be interesting to see what we learn and how we go from there.
And what's been the experience so far?
Well, I think it's really too early for me to say what's been so far, but we'll see soon. It's very new.
Okay. Since we are talking about some of the tools that you've brought in, especially to curb misinformation, I want to talk about the AI model that you've put in place with Sphere and what the learnings are from that, and whether you believe that, in this world of generative AI, etc., this is going to be the route forward in being able to address some of these issues.
Well, we've long used AI. I mean, it's interesting to hear now the public conversation around AI, and I think it's particularly because of the generative AI and particularly around chat. But we've long used AI in the context of safety. So, for example, we have tools in the background that enable us to keep unconnected adults from messaging minors. We also use this AI to identify what we would think of as potentially suspicious accounts and prevent those suspicious accounts from connecting with minors. Those suspicious accounts, that's all AI and signals that are used to develop and identify what is a suspicious account. That account may not violate our policies, we may not have an indication they're violating our policies, but based on signals or behaviors of those accounts, we can identify them as suspicious, and we can prevent them from engaging with a minor or prevent us from sharing minors, offering up minors and people you may know to those accounts. So this is a kind of AI that we've been using for a really long time in the context of safety.